halfway through spare, he knew as he stood with his family what he was going to
He'd
say.
sold out. You know, this is the guy who's sold out.
Like Meghan Markle, because she made it pretty clear to all her friends, the people who work for her, not to talk to me. So it was quite an uphill trample them, or do they try to ignore them? And how do they get ahead and stay on top? And that's what makes Meghan like...
Royal biographer Tom Bower has just made a statement about Meghan Markle that sent shockwaves through social media, igniting fierce debate across platforms almost instantly. While headlines obsessed over the usual drama, something far more significant was happening quietly in the background. Netflix pulled the plug on her cooking show, and insiders insist it was not simply about disappointing ratings. According to Bower, the real reason behind its collapse reveals a much deeper problem, one that strikes at the heart of Meghan's Hollywood ambitions. By the time you hear the full picture, the idea of a glittering comeback may look very different indeed. So what exactly did Tom Bower say? His words were direct, unsparing, and impossible to ignore. Speaking to reporters, he declared that Meghan Markle is not any kind of talent. No diplomatic phrasing, no softening of the blow, just a blunt assessment that immediately fueled controversy. And before dismissing this as casual criticism, consider this. Bower is not known for reckless commentary. He has built a career investigating powerful public figures, and when he speaks, it tends to land with force. And that is where this story truly begins.
Supported, sweet life, running around and doing the things that I think everyone maybe is part of your day-to-day, but if you don't think about...
Skimdens teams na ibekens furrow, the baldy avaisentis prondav of...
Tom Bower is not a casual commentator chasing headlines. He is an investigative biographer with a reputation for digging where others hesitate to look. Over several years, he conducted extensive research into Meghan's life, interviewing more than 80 individuals who worked with her, knew her socially, or interacted with her professionally. The result was his book Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors. This was not speculation, he insists, but testimony drawn from first-hand accounts and documented conversations. What makes this even more compelling is what happened behind the scenes during the book's development. According to Bower, publishers were anxious about the potential fallout. There were concerns that any criticism might be framed as something else entirely, that controversy would overshadow content. Yet he moved forward determined to focus strictly on verifiable character assessments and professional conduct. And what he claims to have uncovered surprised even seasoned industry figures. It was not about race, not about public image battles. It was about personality, ambition, and behavior when the cameras are off. And that revelation shifts the entire conversation in a new direction.
I would say Meghan, but it feels very Harry. He basically has just come out and had this rage.
According to Bower's sources, the turning point came far sooner than anyone expected. Within 6 months, just 6 months, streaming executives allegedly realized something was not working. A $100 million partnership had been signed with enormous anticipation, framed as a bold new chapter for the platform. But insiders claim that behind closed doors, confidence shifted quickly. This is Netflix, a company that reshaped global entertainment and built its reputation on data, trends, and audience behavior. They are not known for impulsive decisions. So when internal evaluations reportedly flagged concerns early, it raised eyebrows across Hollywood. What changed so quickly? Sources suggest the issue was not publicity or name recognition. Meghan's profile guaranteed attention at first. The challenge, they claim, was sustainability, creating programming that audiences genuinely wanted to watch, return to, and recommend. And that distinction matters. Securing a headline-making deal is one thing, building long-term viewer loyalty is another entirely. Executives, according to these reports, allegedly discovered a gap between brand power and creative delivery. In today's streaming war, attention is currency, and if audiences are not engaged, even the biggest contracts can begin to look uncertain. That realization, insiders say, came faster than anyone anticipated.
Unless he's holding something real, sharp, and dangerous. When Tom Bower talks, people stop breathing for a moment, because whatever he says next...
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. Executives, according to industry insiders, believed they were investing in a personality with both star appeal and creative depth. The expectation was clear: transform Meghan into a modern lifestyle authority, a polished figure in the vein of Martha Stewart, someone viewers would trust for home inspiration, entertaining advice, and curated elegance. That was the strategy. That was the rebrand. It was meant to be a decisive pivot after years of public controversy. A softer image, a relatable presence, a fresh chapter. But instead of launching her into lifestyle royalty, the project reportedly struggled to find footing. What was envisioned as a triumphant reinvention became, in the eyes of critics, an uncomfortable misfire. Tom Bower claims he was not surprised. In interviews, he argued that Meghan has often appeared performative rather than natural. According to him, authenticity is the currency of modern media, and audiences are highly attuned to it. In today's landscape, viewers quickly sense when something feels curated instead of lived, and when that connection falters, engagement fades fast. He went even further, suggesting that beyond image and presentation lies a deeper issue: substance. In a crowded marketplace filled with strong, distinct voices, standing out requires more than visibility. It requires something meaningful to say, and that, critics argue, is where the real challenge began.
On the nerve at night. And so that is something that I cannot wait to see. And thank you so much for...
Critics argue the issue went beyond production quality or marketing strategy. According to industry observers, what was missing was originality, a clear point of view that felt grounded and distinctive. The brand appeared polished, carefully styled, visually appealing, but some viewers felt there was little beneath the surface. And in today's streaming environment, surface alone rarely sustains attention. The concern, analysts say, is that the show was built around an image rather than an authentic foundation. Audiences tend to respond to lived experience, vulnerability, and a sense of personal truth. When that connection feels distant, engagement drops quickly, no matter how much funding or promotion stands behind it. Now let's look at the numbers, because they paint a sobering picture. Reports indicate that with Love, Meghan ranked 1,217th on Netflix during the second half of 2025. Pause on that for a moment. Out of the thousands of titles available globally on the platform, landing at 1,217 suggests the program struggled to capture sustained viewership. In the streaming world, metrics speak louder than headlines, and in this case, they spoke clearly.
Interviews, there is a completely different story. One stitched together with hidden relationships, quiet favors, private flight.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. Industry analysts didn't just call the performance disappointing, some described it as deeply underwhelming given the scale of expectations. For a personality once positioned as global star power, the numbers told a starkly different story. Reports indicate the program drew roughly 2 million views across 4 months. In the streaming world, where breakout hits can generate that in days, the contrast is impossible to ignore. To put it into perspective, independent creators with modest production setups sometimes generate comparable traffic within weeks. That comparison alone raised eyebrows across media circles. When a project backed by a major platform and a globally recognized name struggles to gain traction, questions naturally follow about audience connection and long-term viability. The holiday special performed marginally better, reaching around 2.4 million views, yet it reportedly ranked near 1,500th overall on the platform. Even the strongest installment failed to approach the upper tier of Netflix programming. For someone whose wedding commanded worldwide attention and dominated headlines across continents, the shift is striking. Visibility does not always translate into sustained viewership, and in entertainment, sustained viewership is what determines survival.
But a revelation so sharp, so deeply unsettling, that it forces us to look again at everything we thought we knew about.
This was not a mild dip in performance. It was a collapse that raised serious questions across the entertainment industry. Consider the scale of expectation. When Meghan Markle married into the British royal family, the ceremony drew a global audience measured in the billions. Few public figures begin a media career with that level of built-in recognition. Her name was known on every continent, discussed in every major newsroom, debated across social platforms. That kind of visibility is priceless. It cannot be manufactured through marketing budgets or public relations campaigns. Yet even with that extraordinary advantage, the transition into lifestyle programming failed to capture sustained interest. Flower arranging and home entertaining may appear charming on paper, but recognition alone does not guarantee engagement. What does that reveal? It suggests that celebrity opens the door, but content determines whether viewers stay inside. Curiosity might drive an initial wave of clicks. Audiences may watch once to see what the project offers, but if the material feels repetitive, detached, or uninspired, they move on quickly. And in this case, the return audience simply did not materialize.
You know, it really embeds such great values from the get-go. I was Girl Scout, my mom was my troop leader, and
The buts of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. According to industry insiders, the streaming platform did not pull the plug immediately. Executives reportedly held on, believing a long-term payoff might justify the investment. They envisioned future exclusives, perhaps a deeply personal royal documentary or a candid account if circumstances ever shifted dramatically. Access was the prize. The possibility of insider revelations was the gamble. Instead, what unfolded on screen was far more modest. Scenes of carefully packaged snacks and neatly arranged floral displays replaced the high-stakes storytelling executives had quietly anticipated. For a company accustomed to gripping documentaries and global hits, the contrast was striking. Sources suggest that decision-makers were surprised by how flat the final result felt. Meghan was reportedly given experienced producers, significant financial backing, and broad creative freedom. The infrastructure was there. The marketing power was there. The platform reach was global. When every resource is aligned and the audience still fails to respond, executives begin asking difficult questions. Was it the format, the concept, or something deeper? In Hollywood, the harsh truth is this: exposure creates opportunity, but sustained success demands connection. And when viewers disengage despite every advantage, the issue rarely lies with lighting or promotion.
Against a controversial claim made by Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. The drama unfolded during a recent red carpet appearance.
There is, according to critics, only one conclusion executives eventually reach in situations like this: the project lacks the spark audiences respond to. What makes the story more striking is the claim that Meghan reportedly believed the show would be a success, perhaps even an award contender. Insiders suggest she viewed it as the beginning of a powerful reinvention, a confident step into lifestyle television. The disconnect between expectation and outcome is what startled observers most. While viewership numbers told a sobering story, she was said to be optimistic about its impact. That gap between perception and public reaction became part of the larger conversation surrounding the project. So what truly went wrong? According to the biographer, the issue was not production quality or budget limitations, it was authenticity. He argues that audiences sensed performance rather than personality. In an era where viewers crave relatability and spontaneity, even subtle overcalculation can feel distant on screen. Crew members reportedly shared that certain scenes were filmed repeatedly, in pursuit of a specific tone or image. Precision is not unusual in television production, but when polish overshadows warmth, connection can fade. And in lifestyle programming especially, connection is everything.
People who were aligned with Meghan, is that true?
Absolutely. She did her very best and her staff to stop people talking to me, but was...
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. Crew accounts suggest that retakes were not driven by lighting errors or technical flaws, but by image concerns. According to those familiar with the production, scenes were repeated because she was dissatisfied with how she looked on camera. Every strand of hair, every camera angle, every close-up was reportedly scrutinized with intense focus. There is nothing unusual about wanting to look polished on television. However, insiders claim the emphasis often shifted away from the cooking itself and toward visual perfection. In a format built around warmth, comfort, and authenticity, that distinction matters. Viewers tend to respond to spontaneity, flower on the counter, hair tied back, laughter that feels unfiltered. When presentation begins to outweigh substance, audiences notice. Sources describe an atmosphere where maintaining a flawless image became central. The kitchen setting, which should have felt inviting and relaxed, was allegedly treated more like a styled magazine shoot than a lived-in space. That contrast may explain why the program struggled to connect. Because here is the paradox: a show built on themes of family, home, and simplicity must feel real to resonate. If the focus drifts toward control instead of connection, the emotional thread can weaken. And in entertainment today, emotional authenticity is not optional, it is everything.
We're gonna enjoy. Ready? Bespoke packaging, do you see?
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. At the same time, the show was promoting themes of warmth, loyalty, and family connection. Headlines about Meghan's strained relationship with her father resurfaced. Reports noted that he had undergone a serious medical procedure, including a leg amputation, and critics questioned the absence of any visible reconciliation. Whether fair or not, that contrast became part of the public conversation. In today's media landscape, perception often carries as much weight as reality. Viewers began asking difficult questions. How do you build a brand centered on compassion and family values while unresolved personal conflicts remain so visible? Even without knowing the full private truth, the optics alone created tension. It was not just about one medical crisis, it was about narrative consistency. Audiences are highly attuned to authenticity, especially when someone positions themselves as a voice of empathy and connection. If there appears to be a gap between public messaging and private life, skepticism grows quickly. And the scrutiny did not stop there. Critics pointed out that key elements of the production itself felt staged, the mansion reportedly rented, the scenic beehives arranged for visual effect. When lifestyle storytelling begins to look constructed rather than lived in, viewers sense it immediately. In an era obsessed with real, anything that feels curated can quickly undermine the entire message.
Desperately ill father has sent a heartfelt message to his daughter, pleading, "I don't want to die estranged." Thomas
Long, even the celebrity guests who appeared on the program became part of the conversation. Viewers noticed stiff smiles, guarded body language, and interactions that felt more contractual than heartfelt. It did not look like close friends gathering in a kitchen for fun. It looked arranged. And in entertainment, that distinction matters more than ever. Some insiders described the atmosphere as oddly formal, almost tense. One source summed it up bluntly, saying it felt like watching someone perform what they believed a warm, relatable person should look like, rather than witnessing natural warmth itself. That observation stuck because it echoed what many viewers were already thinking. There was little spontaneity. Conversations felt polished, laughter carefully timed, reactions measured. Instead of the relaxed rhythm that makes lifestyle content inviting, the scenes carried the weight of rehearsal. The result? Beautiful visuals, yes, but emotional distance beneath the surface. In 2026, audiences are media savvy. They have grown up on reality shows, live streams, and influencers who blur the line between curated and candid. They know when a moment feels lived in and when it feels produced, and once that doubt sets in, it becomes almost impossible to win viewers back.
Was handed about who Meghan is when she was born and how her rise unfolded doesn't match the records he uncovered.
Limon and Stogs Paganite, and audiences know exactly what a manufactured performance looks like. From the rented mansion backdrop to the visibly uneasy guests in the camera-ready hair while supposedly cooking, every element felt curated to the last detail. The polish was undeniable, but the soul was missing. Viewers do not reject gloss, they reject emptiness. When a program feels constructed around image rather than substance, the illusion eventually cracks. And once that crack appears, it spreads fast. The foundation of this show was not built on lived experience or genuine expertise. It was built on perception, and perception alone is fragile. But here is where the story takes a sharper turn. The public response was not explosive outrage, it was something colder, indifference. The comment sections told a story far more revealing than ratings charts ever could. People were not furious, they were fatigued.
And Harry too. And she targeted, there's no doubt she targeted Harry and found someone who was a childhood friend of his who could...
Long. Another comment gathering hundreds of likes declared, "Finally, Netflix found its spine." That reaction says everything. Viewers were not mourning the cancellation, they were celebrating it. The dominant emotion was not disappointment, it was relief. Relief that the cycle was ending. Relief that the noise might finally quiet down. That shift in tone is powerful. Public sentiment rarely flips overnight, but when it does, it leaves little room for recovery. And this is precisely what Tom Bauer predicted years earlier. In his writing, he suggested that audiences would eventually grow weary of what he described as a repetitive narrative of grievance. He argued that sympathy has a shelf life, and that once it expires, it rarely renews itself. At the beginning, after the Oprah interview, there was widespread compassion. Many viewers were willing to listen. They believed perhaps the couple had endured real hardship. They extended grace. They offered understanding. But something changed. The tone moved from empathy to skepticism, from curiosity to fatigue. And in entertainment, when the audience begins to feel emotionally drained rather than emotionally invested, the outcome is almost inevitable.
So the two idiots are hoping that this Cookie Queens documentary at Sundance turn...
Long. As the months passed and the grievances continued, something subtle but powerful began to shift. Projects stalled, announcements fizzled, big promises led to quiet disappointments, and gradually audiences stopped asking why, and started asking why bother. The biographer captured the turning point in a single line: "The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference." That statement hits hard, because indifference is final. Hate still means emotion, hate still means engagement, but indifference, that means the audience has emotionally checked out, and that is exactly where things appear to stand now. People are no longer outraged. They are not organizing campaigns. They are not passionately defending or attacking. They are scrolling past headlines without clicking. They are ignoring trailers. They are choosing other content. That quiet disengagement speaks louder than any trending hashtag ever could. When news of the cancellation surfaced, the dominant reactions were simple. Good. Finally. About time. There were no online movements demanding renewal. No waves of outrage at Netflix. Just a collective shrug. In the world of entertainment, indifference is far more damaging than controversy. Controversy fuels conversation. Indifference ends it.
That was offered to her by marrying Prince Harry could have done.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. For someone whose entire public identity is built on relevance, visibility, and constant exposure, this shift is especially brutal, because when attention fades, so does leverage. And the comment sections, they are not holding back. Viewers are dissecting contradictions in real time. They are pointing out what they see as inconsistencies between words and actions. One comment that gathered more than 400 likes read, "These folks are so fame-hungry, and then when they get written about, they don't love the way they've been written about. You can't make your mind up." That reaction speaks volumes. People feel they understand the pattern, seek attention, reject criticism, repeat. Another widely supported remark captured the mood even more clearly. "We are lovers of victimhood, but you too. We've just had a little too much of it." That line reflects something deeper in American culture. Audiences do empathize with struggle. They root for underdogs. They support people facing adversity, but when hardship becomes the primary storyline year after year, sympathy can slowly transform into fatigue. And once fatigue sets in, the spotlight no longer feels flattering. It feels exhausting.
To let me take the morning off and just wait at the Opera House for Meghan and Harry, and I waited for
There is always a threshold in public perception, and many observers believe that threshold has now been crossed. The repeated framing of hardship, the constant return to the same grievances, has created a sense of repetition that audiences no longer find compelling. What once sparked curiosity now sparks indifference. The biographer predicted this trajectory years ago. He argued that narratives built too heavily on victimhood eventually collapse under their own weight. At first, people listen, then they question, finally they disengage, and today that disengagement is unmistakable. The interest has cooled, the sympathy has thinned, the emotional investment has faded. Now the story takes another turn. When they stepped away from royal life, America was positioned as the promised land. California symbolized freedom, reinvention, and opportunity. The expectation was clear: a new audience, a fresh platform, a second act written on their own terms. For a brief moment, it seemed possible. The interviews drew attention, the headlines dominated cycles, the curiosity was powerful. But momentum is fragile, and what begins as fascination can quietly dissolve when the substance fails to match the spectacle.
And of dozens and dozens of emails to her friends, and most of them didn't even reply. And obviously I spoke to her father, who
Here is where many analysts say the real miscalculation happened. The assumption seemed to be that audiences would permanently rally behind a victim narrative. And yes, people do support underdogs. They do stand behind those who rise from adversity. That instinct is real and powerful. But there is a line. There is a crucial difference between resilience and repetition. Viewers admire growth. They respect accountability. What they resist is a cycle that feels endless. And according to critics, that distinction was misunderstood. One commenter summarized the shift perfectly, writing, "They went way too hard on the 'we are victims' angle and assessed the mood of their generation correctly, that we are lovers of victimhood. But the country did finally find a way to say, you know what, we love victims, but you too. We've just had a little too much of it." That observation resonated because it reflects fatigue, not fury. It signals saturation, not scandal. The mood did not turn overnight. It evolved. Sympathy slowly transformed into skepticism. And once that happens, regaining momentum becomes far more difficult than capturing it in the first place.
And so to answer your question, there isn't a cream or some kind of concoction that creates this look. No.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. What existed at the beginning was simple and human. There was space for empathy. People understood that struggle deserves compassion. But what was overlooked is this: sympathy is not endless. It has a ceiling. You cannot build a permanent identity around grievance and expect it to sustain you forever. When they first settled in California and sat down for those headline-making interviews, audiences leaned in. Many truly listened. Some believed every word. There was real concern, real emotional investment. The public gave them the benefit of the doubt. But then the narrative didn't evolve. It repeated. Interview after interview returned to hardship. Appearance after appearance circled back to pain. Project after project centered on what had been endured rather than what would be built next. And slowly, the emotional temperature shifted. Not to anger, not even to outrage, to fatigue. Here's the cultural truth that matters most. America loves redemption arcs. We celebrate reinvention. We champion resilience. We root for the comeback story. But a comeback requires action. It demands forward motion. It calls for growth that audiences can see and feel, and when that forward motion doesn't arrive, when the second act feels like a replay of the first, the applause grows quiet.
Not with a documentary, and this is what I've never understood. I don't get it. I don't.
Long, a second act only works if you build something real with it. Opportunity alone means nothing without execution, and what was actually created. Short-lived podcasts, programs that barely registered, announcements that made noise but delivered little staying power. One by one, the ventures stalled. That California move was framed as liberation. No palace protocol, no centuries-old expectations, total creative freedom. The world was open. They could have launched a powerful charitable movement with measurable impact. They could have produced thoughtful documentaries, spotlighted overlooked voices, built initiatives that changed lives in tangible ways. The platform was enormous. The reach was global. But the perception that settled in was different. Instead of momentum, audiences saw repetition. Instead of reinvention, they saw more interviews. Instead of impact, they heard more grievances. And that disconnect mattered. One comment captured the frustration perfectly. Want constant press, and you want to constantly be a topic of conversation, and then you're upset that these papers write about you. That line resonated because it points to a contradiction people feel but struggle to articulate. Visibility is power, but visibility also invites scrutiny. When someone seeks the spotlight yet rejects its consequences, the public notices. And once that perception hardens, rebuilding trust becomes far more difficult than launching the next project.
And friendship is so important. And I think so many people also have this question.
I'm not even long, or that the press might dig in ways you personally find uncomfortable. That's the cost of living publicly. You cannot step into the spotlight, monetize your story, and then recoil when the spotlight grows hotter. That contradiction became impossible to ignore. You cannot pursue headlines and then protest their existence. You cannot negotiate exclusive deals, package your narrative for global platforms, and then seem surprised when audiences want more transparency. It does not work both ways. The shift did not happen because people are heartless. It happened because patience wore thin. The push felt relentless. The requests for sympathy grew louder. Yet what the public received in return felt smaller. The balance tipped. In this culture, resilience earns respect. So does humility. So does quietly doing the work and letting results speak. What many viewers felt they saw instead was grievance presented as growth and frustration framed as injustice. Over time, that tone changes how a story lands. And now we are watching the next chapter unfold. Because when relevance begins to slip and momentum stalls, the response is rarely calm. This is where panic mode begins to show.
And driving up, and he's, you know how to curtsy, right? And I just thought it was a joke.
Right. Long, the biographer insists this is the phase no brand strategist wants to admit exists. The scramble. Revenue streams are thinning, major opportunities are no longer lining up, and every new idea feels less like vision and more like survival. When momentum disappears, urgency replaces confidence, and that shift is impossible to hide. Look at the moves being made. She reportedly reconnected with Sunshine Sachs, the same PR firm that once helped shape her narrative during earlier controversies. That decision speaks volumes. When a public figure returns to former handlers, it rarely signals expansion. It signals recalibration. If everything were thriving, if the image was soaring, there would be no need to revisit old crisis architects. And then there are the product launches, small lifestyle items. Bookmarks printed with "fell asleep here." On paper, it sounds harmless. In context, it feels revealing. This is not empire-building energy. It feels experimental, almost improvised, like tossing concepts into the marketplace hoping one catches attention. That is what creative pressure looks like when it turns reactive. Instead of leading culture, you begin chasing it. Instead of setting trends, you test fragments. And when the public senses that shift from confidence to contingency, perception changes quickly.
Okay, Megs, go.
Meghan Sussex, reading for Jaws.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. What we are witnessing, according to the biographer, is not a long-term vision unfolding. It is urgency wrapped in the language of entrepreneurship. When product ideas feel rushed and partnerships feel forced, the industry notices. Hollywood has a sharp memory, and silence can be louder than scandal. Invitations that once arrived automatically reportedly no longer do. No major premieres, no elite charity galas, no inner circle gatherings. That absence sends a message without anyone saying a word. In celebrity culture, access is currency. When doors quietly stop opening, it signals a shift in standing. For someone whose public identity has relied heavily on proximity to influence and visibility, that shift can feel seismic. Being outside the velvet rope after once standing inside it is not just uncomfortable, it is reputational. And then there are the reported attempts to build new alliances. Rumors suggest outreach efforts toward Jennifer Aniston's circle, allegedly through Aniston's boyfriend. If true, that detail raises eyebrows. Authentic friendships do not require intermediaries or strategic pathways. They grow naturally through shared spaces and mutual respect. When connection appears transactional, observers take note. Sources close to the situation say Hollywood can sense when someone is networking from confidence versus networking from necessity, and right now, the difference appears difficult to ignore.
Meghan Markle had a cameo in Horrible Bosses, and
he used to audition for us all the time.
Long reports now suggest repeated efforts to re-enter circles that have quietly moved on. Outreach messages, rekindling attempts, invitations that never quite materialize. When relationships are solid, they do not require persistent nudging or strategic reappearances. They evolve naturally. When they must be engineered, the imbalance becomes visible. Hollywood is perceptive. It recognizes the difference between organic momentum and manufactured momentum. During moments of stability, collaborations flow. During moments of decline, movements become louder, faster, more obvious. And that contrast tells its own story. The deeper issue is not simply that these efforts may be falling short, it is the optics surrounding them. Each unexpected product rollout, each rumored attempt to reconnect with former allies, each visible pivot, together they create a pattern that industry insiders analyze carefully. In celebrity culture, patterns matter. What once appeared to be a carefully structured empire now looks reactive. The confident narrative of long-term strategy is being replaced by short-term adjustments. When the message shifts from expansion to survival, audiences notice. And in an environment where perception drives opportunity, even subtle signals can redefine standing.
And the stories that have come out, I kind of want to reserve my main review until after I actually read.
The biographer predicted this shift long ago. He warned that once the major streaming payments slowed and the headline-grabbing contracts evaporated, the cracks would begin to show. And now that forecast feels uncomfortably accurate. What we are witnessing is not a sudden collapse, but a gradual unraveling of momentum that was never as solid as it appeared. There was once a belief that Hollywood had been conquered, that influence had been secured for the long haul. But influence is not declared, it is sustained, and when the spotlight dims, reality becomes clearer. What looked like a lasting empire now appears more like a temporary surge built on timing rather than foundation. The troubling part is not the struggle itself, it is the reaction to it. Every rapid pivot, every urgent rebrand, every high-visibility attempt to regain traction. Together they send a message of instability rather than strategy. Brands sense that. Audiences sense that. Even social circles sense it. Desperation rarely attracts confidence. Now consider the financial dimension. Reports suggest that as much as $38 million has been invested in projects that failed to generate meaningful returns, programs that did not hold viewership, podcasts that failed to sustain momentum, development budgets that produced little measurable impact. When that level of capital disappears without durable success, the pressure intensifies, and pressure, especially in the public eye, magnifies every next decision.
So she was snubbed by Hollywood. What's hilarious is that Meghan really did think, I'm told, that when she paid $12,000...
And then there are the ventures that barely launched before collapsing under their own weight. This is no longer a case of unfortunate timing or creative misfires. It is a repeated cycle, and patterns like this rarely go unnoticed. The financial reality adds another layer of pressure. That Montecito estate carries enormous mortgage obligations. The lifestyle attached to it does not come cheap. Security alone is estimated to cost a substantial sum each year. When major contracts were active, those expenses may have felt manageable. But now the revenue pipeline looks very different. The Netflix agreement that once symbolized long-term stability has reportedly cooled. The Spotify partnership ended abruptly. Book royalties, while significant at first, are not recurring in the same way. That leaves one unavoidable question: where does consistent income come from next? Industry observers suggest the current strategy resembles what insiders call slow ghosting. No dramatic announcements, no explosive breakups, just fewer commitments, quieter renewals, and increasing distance. It is the corporate equivalent of stepping back without saying it out loud. If that assessment proves accurate, the next year could be pivotal. Because when partnerships fade gradually instead of ending publicly, it signals something deeper, a shift in confidence behind closed doors.
Netflix has canceled Meghan Markle's show With Love. Meghan, yes, that's right. The show's performance was extremely poor. It didn't even...
This is how major corporations handle uncomfortable exits. There is no explosive press release, no dramatic statement about cutting ties. That would create headlines and invite scrutiny. Instead, the strategy is subtle. Fewer renewals, no new projects approved, meetings that quietly stop happening. The relationship simply fades from view. From the platform's perspective, it is smart business. Distance is created without appearing hostile. There is no villain in the story, just a natural shift in priorities. But for the couple whose future depended on those agreements, the impact is severe. Their long-term financial roadmap was built around sustained streaming partnerships and brand collaborations. Forecasted income shaped spending decisions. Overhead expanded under the assumption of stability. Now the projected revenue looks uncertain, while the expenses remain fixed. Large property costs, staff, security, operational teams, these do not shrink overnight. When anticipated deals fail to materialize, the gap becomes impossible to ignore. The biographer also made a crucial distinction that many overlook. He emphasized that Arkwell is not structured as a traditional charity. It operates as a commercial entity with branding, production, and media components attached. That difference matters greatly, because when a brand is commercial, it must generate measurable returns, and if those returns stall, the pressure intensifies dramatically.
My dear friend Daniel is coming over with single skillet spaghetti.
Single skillet spaghetti.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. Many people assume Arkwell is purely philanthropic because of its branding and the language surrounding it. The name sounds charitable. The messaging suggests service, but structurally, it functions as a business enterprise. According to public filings and independent reviews, only a limited portion of its activity translates into direct charitable distribution. The majority revolves around media production, brand positioning, and revenue-generating ventures. That distinction changes everything. Because when a foundation operates commercially, it must perform like one. It must deliver results, secure partnerships, and justify investment. And the financial picture being discussed is not flattering. Reports of approximately $38 million spent across stalled projects, underperforming media ventures, and development costs paint a sobering portrait. Add to that the ongoing obligations, a high-value mortgage, security expenses, staff salaries, and a lifestyle built around prestige, and the pressure intensifies rapidly. What makes this especially complicated is perception. The public image relies on luxury, influence, and upward momentum. Downsizing would not simply be a financial adjustment, it would be symbolic. It would signal contraction. And in celebrity branding, contraction is interpreted as decline. That reality leaves very little room for maneuvering, and the clock keeps ticking.
A huge thanks to our team at Artful Productions, Chanel, Wesley, Q. We love you guys. Thank you so much.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. The entire narrative was built on triumph, two people walking away from an ancient institution to build something stronger, freer, and more profitable on their own terms. That image of bold independence became the foundation of their brand. But according to the biographer, the warning signs were there long before the cracks became visible. He wrote that stepping away from royal infrastructure came with invisible costs. Security, global PR networks, institutional credibility, automatic prestige, those weren't just symbolic benefits, they were operational advantages. He argued that the assumption more wealth would flow independently underestimated how much the system had been quietly sustaining their relevance and leverage. Now the pattern is becoming harder to ignore. Each stalled project weakens negotiating power for the next one. Each public setback chips away at brand confidence. Investors hesitate, audiences disengage, partnerships cool, revenue projections shrink, and when momentum disappears, rebuilding it becomes exponentially harder. This isn't just about one canceled program or one underperforming venture, it's about compounding erosion. Reputation affects funding, funding affects production quality, production affects audience interest, and when interest declines, the financial spiral tightens. Breaking that cycle requires a decisive pivot, and so far, none has materialized.
Back in 2017, she hired Sunshine Sachs, apparently. I don't know how, but she hired this.
What makes this moment even more striking is the absence of a clear course correction. Based on everything unfolding publicly, there appears to be no cohesive strategy to halt the downward momentum, no recalibration, no reinvention, just motion without direction. While carefully curated lifestyle scenes were being filmed, polished kitchens, floral arrangements, controlled lighting, the broader Hollywood blueprint was quietly unraveling. The show intended to position her as a lifestyle authority failed to gain traction, ranking beyond the top tier on the platform. The major streaming partnership once promoted as long-term security now appears to be fading without ceremony. And perhaps most telling of all, the American audience that initially leaned in with curiosity has largely leaned out. Consider the contrast. The original vision centered on independence, greater creative freedom, expanded influence, amplified wealth, autonomy without constraint. That was the promise. That was the pitch. Yet today the landscape looks dramatically different. Freedom without institutional backing has proven far more complex than anticipated. Independence requires sustained public demand, and demand cannot be manufactured. The shift from fascination to indifference may be the most consequential turning point of all.
Meghan Markle's Netflix show With Love Meghan will not be returning for a third season. The lifestyle series, which saw the boom.
The central assumption was clear. America would be the reset button. Hollywood would offer reinvention. The narrative of escape and resilience would carry them indefinitely. But each of those expectations has collided with reality, and reality has not been generous. From the outset, the biographer warned of a dangerous contradiction: the desire to retain royal prestige while simultaneously rejecting royal structure, the wish to preserve status and influence while operating without the boundaries that once protected it. He argued that the institution provided more than visibility. It offered insulation, discipline, and strategic guidance. Remove that framework, and exposure increases dramatically. He also predicted something many dismissed at the time, that American audiences, initially sympathetic, would grow weary of repetition. Compassion has limits. Narratives must evolve, and when evolution does not occur, attention fades. What stands out most now is not just the miscalculation, it is how avoidable much of this appears in hindsight. Authentic storytelling, meaningful projects, tangible impact, these could have rewritten the trajectory. A pivot toward substance might have shifted perception. Instead, repetition replaced reinvention, and in a culture that rewards renewal, stagnation is costly.
And don't get me started on her one-pan pasta. The original recipe belongs to Martha Stewart, but Meghan's version is a bland copy.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. The persistence was striking. Instead of recalibrating, the same narrative was reinforced again and again. The messaging did not evolve. The strategy did not pivot, it simply intensified. Meanwhile, an estimated $38 million flowed into projects that failed to establish longevity, credibility, or meaningful cultural impact. That is not a small misstep. That is structural collapse. What appears to have been misunderstood during the departure is this: the institution was not a cage, it was scaffolding. It supplied context, gravitas, global relevance. It ensured that every appearance carried weight because it was anchored to something larger than personality. Remove that anchor, and the spotlight becomes far less forgiving. The assumption seemed to be that independence would automatically multiply influence. Instead, separation removed the very framework that made the brand compelling in the first place. Without that historic connection, the narrative shifts. The mystique fades. What remains must stand entirely on its own merit. And the world was watching. Billions tuned in for the wedding. Every step, every speech, every move was amplified across continents. The platform existed. The audience was present. The opportunity was unprecedented. But attention is not permanence. Without renewal, even the brightest spotlight eventually dims.
Meghan Markle has opened up about the royal fashion rule that left her feeling completely inauthentic during her time in the UK.
The opportunities were extraordinary, the kind most people spend a lifetime chasing. Access to global platforms, unmatched visibility, elite connections. And yet, one by one, those advantages slipped away. That is the heart of this story. Not misfortune, not destiny, not circumstance beyond control, but the reality of having leverage, influence, and momentum, and failing to convert it into something sustainable. When every door opens and nothing lasting is built behind it, the outcome becomes inevitable. Now we're witnessing the aftershock. Resources tighten, public curiosity cools, the headlines lose urgency, and perhaps the most brutal shift of all, indifference settles in. So where does this lead? Is this truly the final chapter of a Hollywood reinvention, or is there still a strategic comeback waiting in the wings? I want to hear your perspective. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you appreciate deep dives like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next.